Welcome again to everybody who's joined us this evening to the Kingston 2023 Hedgehog Talk, where we're going to be talking about some work that we've been doing with the Institute of Zoology and their London Hogwatch programme over the course of last year, working with lots of volunteers, some of you on the call this evening, who have been going out with camera traps to try and work out how our local population, hedgehog population, is doing and what we can try and do to try and protect hedgehogs locally and encourage a Kingston where people and hedgehogs and all sorts of wildlife can thrive side by side. So it's a really exciting talk that we have ahead for you this evening. Before we get stuck in, I just want to give you a very quick background. So my name is Elliot Newton, and I'm the Biodiversity Officer for Kingston Council. And this project has been funded through what we call neighbourhood grant funding through through Old Malden and Coombe councillors, which is fantastic to the councillors who voted it through to enable the funding for this project to take place. So thank you to the council for doing that. And this evening, I'm delighted to say I've got a number of special guests who've been absolutely key in delivering this programme as part of the Institute of Zoology. So I've got Izzy and Chloe who are going to do the presentation for us this evening. And I've also got Kate and Chris in the background who'll be able to help asking some questions if you have any questions. As I said at the start, we do have a poll that's live, so feel free to do the poll while you're sitting about and listening to the talk. That will ask you a number of questions about your experience of hedgehogs locally, if you've seen them, and your opinion on if you think they're declining or increasing. And also I'm recording this talk, so we'll be sharing this throughout Kingston Council social media platforms. So please do share it among your friends when it's more publicly accessible to get more people aware of the local situation when it comes to hedgehogs. But Izzy, is it you who's going to be sharing your screen?
Yeah, it is. Do you want me to start?
Great. Yeah, so I'm now going to pass over to Izzy to do. Well, first thing to say is thank you to all you guys so much for being for leading the Hedgehog project over the last year, and thank you to all the volunteers for making it happen. But yes, Izzy, I'll pass over to you now, so if you can share your screen, and we'll jump on with the presentation.
Wonderful. Let me just. Oh, I hope this is going to work.
Perfect.
Yeah. Can everybody see the slide?
I can see it, so I think that's working.
Cool.
Great.
So hello everyone. We're from London Hogwatch, and we're here to talk to you about our 2022 survey in Kingston. So just before we get started, my name's Isabel. I'm a research technician at the Zoological Society of London, and then I'll be giving you guys a brief introduction to the London Hogwatch project. So London Hogwatch is a ZSL-based project founded by Dr. Chris Carbone, who's a senior research fellow at ZSL's Institute of Zoology. It was founded with the aim of identifying the locations of hedgehog populations in Greater London, and the idea behind this being that by increasing our understanding of hedgehog population size and location, we can better inform future conservation management strategies and help halt the decline of hedgehog populations in London. We're quite a small team. We have 4 full-time Hogwatch members, but we have a vast number of collaborators within the zoo and beyond who've really helped us grow over the years and progress our work. So this includes other researchers at the zoo, university students such as PhD students, master's students, and undergraduate students. And they use our data and help us analyze it or build upon our research. It also includes volunteers such as members of community groups, residents and societies who help us deploy our cameras in parks and green spaces, or who take our cameras home with them and set them up to conduct their own garden surveys and then feed that information back to us. The work we do is only possible through collaboration with our funders and partners. So although our core funding comes from the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, this project was also funded by a Kingston neighbourhood grant, which highlights how important councils, local environmental groups, charities and companies are to enable and support the work that we do. So why hedgehogs? Hedgehogs have recently been classified as vulnerable to extinction in the UK, as their numbers have declined by an estimated 46% in the last 13 years. So the causes of this decline are quite complex, as there are many interacting factors, but they are likely to include habitat loss and fragmentation, the use of pesticides and other agricultural chemicals, road traffic, etc. Evidence suggests that this decline has been particularly severe in rural areas, which highlights the importance of urban hedgehog populations for conserving this species. Hedgehogs occur in several areas across Greater London, but our current understanding of these remaining populations is still quite poor. So for us to take effective conservation measures, a greater knowledge of their distribution and population size in London is required, which is where we come in. So what exactly do we do and how do we do it? Between April and October, we carry out systematic camera trapping surveys across Greater London. And a camera trap survey is essentially the deployment of X number of camera traps in an area. And a modern camera trap is essentially a digital camera that we strap to a tree at about hedgehog height. So as you can see in this picture here, and the camera has an infrared sensor, which essentially can see warm objects that are moving, such as animals. When the animal moves past the sensor, it causes the camera to go off, which records an image to the memory card, which we then come and pick up again. This method of data collection leads to the collection of thousands, if not millions of images, which gives us a very big data set to use for robust analyses. It's also a very non-invasive way to build an understanding of local biodiversity within an area and is especially good for collecting records of nocturnal animals. The second step is then to process and analyze the data. So usually we do this ourselves, but another important facet of Hogwatch is the development of machine learning / AI technology to help us process and analyze all of the data. So if we have millions of images, which happens when we do our big 150 camera surveys, for example, Bushy Park, it's really hard for us to go through all of that data manually. So we use machine learning technology to help us identify what species are in the images, which then streamlines the process of analysis so that we can have faster / bigger outputs and get more done, essentially. We then use those results to inform conservation management strategies and biodiversity action plans. So as I said previously, one of the main challenges we face with conservation efforts for London hedgehog populations is a lack of knowledge on their current distribution and size of their populations. And if we had that information, it would allow for conservation efforts to be targeted and much more successful. Currently, the data is predominantly gathered from citizen science surveys, such as Hedgehog Street's Big Hedgehog Map. And whilst this method can provide useful data on hedgehog presence, little can be inferred about their absence and relative abundance. So systematic camera trapping surveys allow us to provide a really robust and consistent way of estimating this information. And for example, our findings from our 2021 Kingston survey were incorporated into the Council's Biodiversity Action Plan. So where do we survey? Since 2016, we've carried out surveys in almost half of all of London's boroughs, and we've deployed nearly 3,000 cameras. So this means we've conducted major surveys of some of the most important green spaces supporting hedgehog populations, in addition to exploring new locations where there was deficient information on hedgehog presence and absence. We do these surveys in a wide range of habitats, so public parks, gardens and allotments, nature reserves, and private green spaces such as railway lines. Surveying a wide range of habitats is really important in helping us build a comprehensive understanding of where hedgehogs might be located and what might be the reasons for this distribution. So recently, we've been surveying railway lines, which is very exciting for us as this is a new habitat for us to be surveying, and they can be quite useful for perhaps connecting habitats, but then perhaps also acting as barriers. There's quite a lot to learn through our data processing, and we're very excited. So what kind of data do we collect? We're collecting data on hedgehog presence and absence, which allows us to infer the occurrence of species, and then also allows us to understand the size and connectivity of hedgehog populations. However, in addition to data on hedgehogs, we obviously also collect the data on any other species that happens to wander past our cameras. So this includes other mammals such as foxes, badgers, squirrels, muntjac, etc. A wide range of bird species such as this song thrush here. And then we've also seen a couple of grass snakes, which has been quite fun. And this allows us to gain a lot of insight into urban mammal ecology. It also allows us to witness species interactions and behaviors, such as parenting, predation, general harmless interactions, for example, a squirrel chasing a snake or a deer chasing a fox, or play fighting. Collecting data on all of these species ultimately enables general biodiversity monitoring, which is quite important because then we can inform our partners of what sort of wildlife exists in these areas, and they can then use that data to protect those areas or species if it's relevant. We also get a lot of information on human footfall and activity levels, which can then give us important insights into human-wildlife coexistence. So last year in 2022, we conducted surveys in 7 boroughs. We managed to deploy 635 cameras across nearly 30 surveys. 10 of those surveys have had hedgehog sightings so far, but we're still in the process of data processing, so hopefully there will be more. These surveys took place in 7 boroughs, including Kingston, Lewisham, Richmond, Camden and Hounslow, and we also added 2 new boroughs to our project, Ealing and Merton. We've also had the help of 172 volunteers including 75 individuals who allowed us to survey their garden or allotment plots. And around 40 of those people were actually involved in our Kingston survey, which indicates really high engagement levels in Kingston and is really, really great to see, as well as being really helpful for us. So thank you so much to everyone who participated in that. Our main findings over the years. Since 2016, we've been able to identify substantial hedgehog hotspots located in North East London, including the Highgate and Hampstead area, as well as the Southwest Barnes and Twickenham area. We've also managed to identify several smaller populations across North and South London. We've also been able to do some continued monitoring in some areas. So annual surveys mean we can monitor what happens to these populations. Are they increasing, decreasing, are they stable, etc. So our surveys in Barnes have shown a decline in the abundance and distribution over the 5-year monitoring period, especially on Barnes Common. The reasons for this decline are still unknown, but we're continuing to monitor the area and support local conservation strategies. With the information that we collect on hedgehog abundance and distribution, we can detect where habitats have become fragmented. So for example, we've identified roads as a major threat for London's hedgehogs, preventing them from accessing otherwise suitable habitats. So this is a map from one of our surveys in the Hampstead Heath area. There's quite a large, robust hedgehog population in the heath. And so we've sort of surveyed the area adjacent to that to see how far out the hedgehog sightings were made and to sort of understand hedgehog distribution. We surveyed on both sides of this road here, which is indicated by this lovely blue line. So to the left is a bunch of allotments, and then to the right is Highgate Cemetery and Waterloo Park. And we would have assumed that both of these areas are quite good hedgehog habitats. But as you can see, there's a distinct trend in the sightings. So every circle represents a camera that was put up. And then if the circle is red, it means there was a hedgehog sighting on the camera. And if it's white, we didn't see a hedgehog. And as you can see, the ones with the red are on the left-hand side of the road, and the ones on the right are all absences. Which indicates that it's highly likely that the road is sort of bisecting this distribution and influencing this trend in distribution, and essentially just stopping the hedgehogs from getting to the other side, which is quite unfortunate. We've also been able to determine the importance of gardens as an important habitat for the hedgehogs, as they are places with a high potential to support hedgehog populations, where nearby green spaces perhaps aren't as suitable or accessible for the hedgehogs. This is indicated by the fact that we often see many hedgehogs in our garden surveys, especially perhaps we see hedgehogs in our garden surveys, but then maybe not in the green spaces around. And this then leads me to the next part of our talk, where Chloe will tell you all about last year's Kingston survey.
Hello, my name's Chloe. I'm a research technician alongside Izzy. I work with Kate and Chris at London Hogwatch, and I'm just going to talk you through the Kingston 2022 survey findings. So in 2021, London Hogwatch completed a camera trap survey of Kingston with 30 garden cameras and 30 park cameras. These were placed in Berrylands Nature Reserve, Elmbridge Meadows and Hogsmill Open Space, the findings of which were then used in Kingston's Biodiversity Action Plan. Overall, in 2021, we found quite a low hedgehog density and activity across the survey site, which indicated that there was a small and fragmented hedgehog population in Kingston. We found 17 hedgehog sightings across 2 gardens and 1 park camera. This meant only 7% of the garden cameras and 3% of the parks cameras had hedgehog activity, and highlighted the importance of gardens in Kingston as a habitat for hedgehogs. As our previous studies in other boroughs across London have shown that large A-rows act as a significant barrier to movement, from our 2021 findings, we therefore suggested that the A3 that runs through the borough and through some key green spaces may be acting as a barrier to hedgehog dispersal and fragmenting populations north and south of the A3. This was particularly important as from the Hedgehog Streets big hedgehog map findings, there was a lot of sightings that we found south of the A3, which is an area understudied in our 2021 survey. With these findings in mind, in 2022, we wanted to survey new areas further in the east of the study area and south of the A3. We therefore decided to survey 4 parks between the 13th of June and the 27th of June, which can be found on the top right picture. 2 of these parks were more south of the A3 in what is commonly known as Old Malden, and these were Hogsmill Valley and Manor Park, and the other 2, Beverley Park and Beeline Way, were north of the A3 in New Malden. Additionally, like 2021 for our 2022 survey, we had a very large amount of support and engagement from local community members of Kingston. 8 volunteers kindly gave up their time to help us with the park survey, and 31 volunteers hosted cameras in their gardens from the 29th of June to the 13th of July. These can be seen in the bottom right photo. All cameras were in place for around 2 weeks, which is about 14 nights, and this was to ensure we had even coverage of each site. Cameras were placed at randomly computer-generated points. The garden cameras were given out to the willing volunteers in the area who put them up themselves with the written instructions and the help of Elliot. Cameras were set to trigger and take a photo every second if an animal entered the detection zone of the camera. As a species of interest, hedgehogs, badgers and foxes are predominantly nocturnal. The use of the infrared flash meant cameras could also be active at night. Due to our species interest, we decided to only process photos taken between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. And any mammal species seen between this time interval was tagged for the park survey. But for the garden cameras, we only looked at hedgehogs. The tag data was then used to calculate something we call trapping rates, which is the amount of sightings divided by the number of nights the camera is active. And this was calculated for each site and species. From our 2022 survey, we had 52 hedgehog sightings. 51 of these sightings came from 10 gardens, which had hedgehog activity, meaning 32% of garden cameras had sightings. Across the 4 parks we surveyed, unfortunately, there was only 1 hedgehog sighting on 1 camera, which gave us an overall trap rate of 0.01, meaning 3% of our parks cameras had sightings. Other mammal species detected included badgers, foxes, cats, dogs, mice, rats, rabbits, and squirrels. The table just provides a summary of the mammal sighting results. And we also took a note of any bird species we saw. The amber listed ones are marked with 1 asterisk, and red listed species are marked with 2 asterisks. Our results for hedgehogs was overall really positive. Hedgehog sightings and distribution was higher than in 2021. Like 2021, we had more hedgehog sightings on the garden cameras and on the park cameras. In the 22 garden camera trap survey, we had 34 more sightings than in the 21 garden survey and a higher trap rate of 0.15. This meant the overall hedgehog activity and distribution was about 4 times higher in our 22 garden survey compared to 2021 garden survey. The higher hedgehog activity in gardens agrees with our findings in 2021 that smaller residential green spaces are playing a really important role as a habitat for hedgehogs. This is probably due to increased food availability from supplementary feeding and the shelter they might provide from any predators. Hedgehog activity in parks remained similar from 2021 to 2022 and was very low, with no increase in the percentage of cameras with hedgehog sightings. We only had 1 contact, which is in Manor Park, which is just south of the A3. Although overall we had a good hedgehog distribution and activity from our 22 survey, it does seem likely the A3 is still potentially acting as a barrier to dispersal for hedgehogs. In 22, we had more hedgehog sightings and a higher density south of the A3 and Old Malden in comparison to New Malden and north of the A3. This finding was also reflected in Hedgehog Street's big hedgehog map, which can be found online. This may indicate that there is a larger population south of the A3, and we suggest that efforts should therefore be made to improve hedgehog habitat in the north, in the New Malden area, to try and increase its population. As you may have guessed, foxes were widely distributed across the survey area, with every camera having fox sightings. Fox trap rate was also very high across all park sites, with 1 camera having a 7.93 trap rate. The high rate is likely to reflect a high fox density in the area. All of the park sites we surveyed bordered onto residential areas, which can act as a good source of food and den site for foxes. Excitingly, this year we had multiple badger sightings in Kingston, with 40 sightings overall, and 16% of our park cameras had badger contacts. We also had a relatively high trap rate of 0.71. We had sightings along the Beeline Way, Manor Park and Hogsmill Valley, and London Hogwatch's first ever badger sighting in a garden camera survey. This was quite a surprising find. We normally find badgers are more sensitive to human disturbance in London and tend to stay in larger green spaces. The unusual find might be due to the fact that there is just such a high density of badgers along the Beeline Way. With badgers and hedgehogs, we normally see quite a clear definition of species boundaries, as badgers are one of the main predators for hedgehogs. However, in 2022, we had sightings of both species in Manor Park. Although it is an interesting discovery, it's quite an unusual occurrence for Hogwatch to see these species occupying the same niche. These sightings were on cameras on opposite sides of the park and quite far away, but may explain why we didn't see hedgehogs in other parks where we saw badgers. In Kingston, we recorded the first sighting of a critically endangered pie martin in more than a century in London, which was an extremely exciting find for Hogwatch and the Borough of Kingston. Once widespread across the UK, it's now generally restricted to northern and central Scotland, with some very small populations in northern England, the New Forest and Wales. Although there were 2 pie martin contacts, we believe from the pictures, as you can see, and the timestamps, it's just to be the same individual that just passes the camera twice. Martins are known to be highly mobile animals and are capable of dispersing large distances, but how the individual arrived in Kingston is unknown. The nearest population would be the New Forest. It's really encouraging that we found a higher hedgehog activity in Kingston in 2022 comparison to 2021. This and the increase in the big hedgehog map record suggests there is a resident population in this area, so congratulations to everyone's efforts to help hedgehogs in the borough. With only 1 sighting in a park, efforts should be focused on improving habitat and connectivity between green spaces and parks and surrounding gardens. This could allow potential hedgehog populations in the area to increase even further and expand their distribution even more. It's also amazing to see such a diversity of mammal species within the borough, with badgers, pie martins, foxes and hedgehogs. Urban wildlife seems to be thriving, and this reflects the increased biodiversity efforts made within the borough, and we highly encourage those to continue to build better habitat for hedgehogs and other species. So our next steps. Excitingly, we're going to be partnering with Kingston Council again in 2023 to continue our biodiversity monitoring, this time with a project funded by the Internet of Things. This will be another camera trap survey, but we'll be using cellular trail cameras to capture data on animal presence. These cameras, unlike the ones used in this study, will upload the images to a private cloud portal and instantly once it's taken a photo, meaning occurrences of priority mammal and bird species across Kingston can be monitored in real time. We're really excited to be continuing this partnership with Kingston and Elliot and look forward to getting back into the field this spring with hopefully some more exciting hedgehog findings and discoveries.
And yeah, so finally, what can you as an individual do to help? So one of the most important things you can do is increase habitat connectivity for hedgehogs, if you're lucky enough to have a garden. This is because hedgehogs travel on average about a mile a night looking for food or for a mate. But as we've discussed in this presentation, there are lots of barriers to hedgehogs in urban settings, roads, fences, walls. But if you have a garden, you can encourage movement by making a hedgehog highway. And that's essentially just a 13 by 13 centimetre square or hole in your garden fence, which is sufficient enough for a hedgehog to pass through. And you could also improve your garden habitat. So creating a variety of habitats within your gardens provides natural food sources, nesting material, a safe space for hedgehogs to stay, and just helps plant and insect biodiversity in your garden. So this sort of means hedgehogs like bushes, hedges and scrubs, so you can encourage those. You could cultivate leaf piles, log piles and compost heaps, which hedgehogs can use for nesting material. You could keep an untidy corner in your garden to encourage native plants and flowers. You could build a pond with gentle slopes so that hedgehogs have access to a water source and don't get trapped in it. This is important, especially with the hotter summers. And if you already have a pond, you can make sure it has a sloping access. So you could do this by making a gentle ramp about 20 degrees from stones or wood, and check any pools that you have daily. Another thing you can do is to not use pesticides in your gardens. For example, slug pellets, they're obviously quite bad for hedgehogs. If you've got some free time on a Sunday afternoon, you could create a hedgehog home. You can follow Wildlife Trust instructions for that, or just give it a Google. And yeah, you could visit hedgehogstreet.org for more resources on how to help hedgehogs. And a final big thank you to our funders, so BHPS and Kingston. We wouldn't have been able to do this without you. And a big thank you to Elliot and all of the volunteers who helped last summer as well. And thank you everyone for listening. If you want to learn more about our project, you can go onto the ZSL website that we've got, or you could follow us on social media for constant survey updates, and get in touch via email and let us know if you've got any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. It's really great to see all the efforts that went into last year to actually finding some really exciting results, especially, you know, more identifying Old Malden as a hedgehog hotspot. I think is a real bit of useful information on how we could encourage their sort of ability to spread through the borough, and the impacts of the A3 might be happening. So yeah, really interesting, and interesting to see about the badgers and pine martins as well. Cracking stuff. So everybody who's on the call, thank you so much for coming along. We've still got time for questions. So there is a Q&A box down here. So please do feel free, if anybody has any questions, to pop it into the box, or any comments you might have. I can also, if you raise your hand, I can also give you the ability to talk as well. So if anybody has any bursting questions, please do feel free to, now is the time. Sharon, I'm gonna allow you to talk, if that's okay. Allow to talk. There you go. You should be able to talk now if you unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I was just going to message and say that was a phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, yeah, huge thank you to Chloe and Izzy for that. Yeah, really informative, and yeah, some really interesting points that we can take from it, hopefully, and learn. And as was said, we're hoping to, people might have seen last week at the Place Committee that took place last Thursday, the Biodiversity Action Plan got approval from so the hedgehog Species Action Plan will now be pushed forward, which is fantastic. Has anybody else got any other questions? Mike, or Councillor Massimi, I should say, would you like to ask your question vocally? I can give the ability to talk. There you go.
Yeah.
Over to you, Mike.
Yes, thanks a lot, Elios, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, I'm very keen to see all the good news about the south of the A3 and the, especially Old Malden. I'm a bit selfish, but that's where the team and I are working days in and days out. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Elliot, is should we focus more on planting alongside the planting more trees, obviously, but on having more edges and variety of edges across, you know, the borough, the parks? I think we've got very few if you look into it, and I believe this is a really good habitat for wildlife, biodiversity, and all this type of hedgehogs, amongst others. And if so, could we think about every time we actually build a kind of a walkway, have it on the side of the walkway, a variety of planting to start having hedges? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Really good question. I suppose edges are really important. Generally, edges where you go from one habitat to another habitat, say from a woodland edge or a hedgerow, provides fantastic, it's called an ecotone, that change between habitats, and that's where you get incredible ecological niches for a whole range of species, and hedgehogs are certainly one of those. But perhaps before I jump in, has Chris, Kate, Izzy, or Chloe got anything to sort of say about general management approaches we could do within our urban landscapes to try and improve connectivity over and above making holes, but trying through planting? I imagine more hedges would be a good thing, but have any of you guys got something to say on that?
I would just maybe say that we definitely have found that in places which do have much more kind of cover and variety of habitats, that's where we find the most hedgehogs. So we did a lot of surveys in Richmond last year now, and where we found the most hedgehogs was Crane Park, and that has so many different varieties of habitats and a lot of cover. And I would generally say that, you know, where we have these more open parks which don't have hedges, cover and trees, that's where we tend to find less. So I definitely think that that's definitely a good way to go for hedgehogs and all of the biodiversity as well.
Great, thanks, Kate. Well, one thing we're also going to try and do, I'm trying to work with the highways team within the council, and where we can find areas where, you know, there are sort of maybe not the A3 in this instance, because that's obviously a significant barrier, and there's some questions about that we can come to in a moment. but for example, along Sheep House Way, which would connect the Hogsmill Valley up to Manor Park, would it be possible to work with the highways team and get some hedgehog sort of warning signs that you can put against the roadside, along what was roadside signage, to try and make people, as they're driving around, to try and be aware that this is a potential important hedgehog crossing point. So that's going to be a significant hopeful action within the biodiversity action plan for hedgehog. So that might also help movement across the borough. But everything we can do, I think one really important thing is talking. This really demonstrates the importance of people's gardens. So if you do have a garden, there's so many resources out there to try and make it more. As what Izzy was saying, there's so many things that you can do within your own area of influence to try and make your garden better for hedgehogs and more connected to the wilder environment. And we're certainly going to try and manage our parks, to make all of our parks, Manor Park being a good example, to make sure there's areas for wildlife within those parks. Obviously, they've got to fill other sort of demands, such as sport functions and socialising functions, but there's a clear biodiversity role that our parks need to play, and hopefully we can empower them in doing that. So I'm just going to keep going through the...
I just add Chris, to your comments too. So the idea of a hedgehog highway scheme too is so useful and important, because it can, you don't have to link up many gardens before you, and especially if there's a back alleyway where there's access to a local park, for example, you start building up a sort of network of land that's available to hedgehogs. Ultimately that's going to be really good for them. It just gives them a whole lot more area to look for food in, and so that's just a really good thing. And as Izzy and Chloe were pointing out, is that those, in some areas where parks might host other species like badgers, which can have an impact on hedgehogs, the private gardens can be really nice refuges for them, or just give them a bit more extra space so that the two species are more likely to be able to coexist together well. So it's great. And I would add just about the understory, having more understory hedges and other kind of plantings, so that you not just have plain open grass areas only, is a really good thing, to have some greater variety.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. We're also within our within our biodiversity action plan, we're going to have a whole hedgerow habitat action plan. So hopefully that will encourage the coverage of hedgerows within our parks. Yeah, making these municipal grassland wastelands, as they might sometimes be seen, having that support more complex, diverse habitat. So certainly more hedges in our parks, hopefully. And hopefully, if you have the ability to garden, more hedges in your gardens as well. That'd be perfect. So I'm just going to run through the questions quickly. Sharon says, excellent work. So thank you very much, Sharon. That's very good. Mike, you've already asked your questions, so thank you for that. I've now got Jackie Barley, and actually, so Jackie, shall I do you want to raise your hand if you would like to talk? If not, I'll read it out for you. Yes, you raised your hand. I'll let you talk. There you go. Allowed to talk. I'm getting a power play here, being able to let people talk. So over to you, Jackie. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, there you go. There.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Over to you.
Okay, yeah, I live luckily down very south of the borough, and I have 2.5 acres of a bund, which is the bund from the out to diggings from the A3. I keep 4 alpacas. It's all, basically it's situated very close to Chessington World of Adventures, and we have lots of livery stables and horses on fields. And I have seen foxes, and I have lots of rats because they tend to eat my alpaca food. But I have never seen a hedgehog, and I actually do have a camera up, probably not where the hedgehogs would be. It's up in the air to stop people jumping over my gate. And I have loads of rubbish, and I've got alpaca fleece that I've just thrown onto a discarded hay pile. So loads of lovely things that hedgehogs could burrow in. But perhaps I have got hedgehogs, but I've never seen them. And I actually do sometimes go out at night and feed the alpacas with my head torch on. And I do have a couple of foxes who come and wait for me, and I do actually feed them. So there's probably some food that the hedgehogs could eat if they wanted to. And I do put water down for the foxes as well. But I've never seen a hedgehog, and I'm just amazed that, I mean, do you think they are there and I just don't come across them, or I don't know?
Oh, really interesting question. I'd love to. There needs to be a whole study on the relationship between alpacas and hedgehogs. I think that's really fascinating.
No, and even, well, my alpacas don't even frighten the foxes away. They just stand there and look at them. So they're supposed to guard against dogs and foxes, things. This is what they tell. But mine are too domesticated, my alpacas. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I suppose it's very difficult to hedgehogs are a pretty cryptic species. That's why cameras are so good at doing them. But before I let the other guys come in quickly, one thing, as he said at the end, we're looking to expand our project next year, and actually this year I should say, and we're actually going to be surveying south into the borough. We're not going quite as south as you. We're going to be starting at the Castle Hill Nature Reserve, which is along the Bones Gate, which I imagine is pretty close to you. So we'll be surveying along the Castle Hill area and heading along the Bones Gate as it goes into the Hogsmill Valley. So that might be able to give us an idea if we've got hedgehogs that far south. But Kingston, the way it sticks out like that, is an incredibly important area for ecological connectivity. Just the farmland down there is so important for birds. It's great for things like skylarks and snipe, and we've even had sort of things like nightingales recorded down there. So you're certainly in a very important part of the borough, but I can't talk specifically about hedgehogs because I don't actually personally know. I don't know if there's any other sort of further comments anybody else would like to bring in from the panel. And that's quite specific about the location, so maybe I'll let you guys.
I guess, Elliot, all I can add is that, quite often when we're doing our surveys, as you know, it takes a few cameras to find them and, a few different locations and things. So I wouldn't give up, Jackie. Keep an open mind because there certainly could be hedgehogs in the area. And it, sometimes just takes a little while. As Elliot was saying, they're quite cryptic. They're quite diminutive, and they can be a bit shy sometimes, so it can take a little while to find them.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks Jackie, and thanks Chris. Great question. I'm going to move down the questions to Matt. Matt, do you want to raise your hand if you want to talk, or shall I just say it for you? Raise your hand if you want to talk. Oh, have you gone? Can't see you. Oh, you have raised your hand. Perfect. Over to you. You just need to unmute yourself, I think.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, is it feasible to create something to allow hedgehogs to safely transverse the A3 to assist in distribution or any other road?
I think that's an incredibly great question. It is one of the most significant barriers I think we have in the borough for ecological connectivity. Maybe I'll let the panel come in and talk about general things we might be able to do. But one thing that we do have there, obviously, for those that you don't know, at the specific point that we're talking about, between where we surveyed last year or 2 years ago and last year, the Hogsmill flows underneath the A3 there. So there would be I imagine there would be a relatively easy win in terms of putting like a mammal ledge alongside the river, which would allow some animals to traverse. I know when the low flows like we're experiencing at the moment, deer quite regularly go underneath, and I've actually seen dead hedgehogs as I've been driving along the A3 myself in that location. I would love to see some sort of pie in the sky thinking, some sort of European style green bridge, but I think that's a bit out the realms of possibility at the moment. But I think a mammal ledge underneath the A3 would provide some benefit. But the panel, do you want to come in on that? Maybe
my team's not going to back me up on this. All right, Kate, do you have any ideas?
I was gonna let you take that one, but all I would say is there is So there's kind of mammal tunnels that are sometimes put under big A roads, but they are very expensive. And I think at the moment there isn't much information about how kind of effective they are and which kind of species use them. So I think that research is being done into that at the moment. There's a PhD student putting cameras, because you have all tunnels of all different sizes and everything. So she's kind of seeing which tunnels are hedgehogs using, which aren't. It may be that bigger ones they're not using because of predators might be using them. And so, yeah, it's quite interesting, but I don't think there's like that much knowledge on those kind of things yet. So I definitely think it's an area that's gonna will develop in the future. But I think by the sounds of the mammal ledge along the river, that sounds like a very feasible, good idea in this specific area. Chris, do you have anything else to say on that?
Yeah, just add to that, especially if Elliot is seeing some signs of hedgehogs being around that area. It might well be that could be an important, it might be an opportunity, and the benefits of something like that could be quite large, even if only one or two individuals cross it every so often. It doesn't have to be regularly used for it to be beneficial. When it comes to looking at connecting populations and genetic isolation and everything, those sort of issues that can threaten isolated populations, having just the odd individual every year crossing could be really, important. So yeah, something that's not massively expensive. And if there's some evidence of hedgehogs using the areas on either side, or at least on one side in the area, might well be beneficial.
Great, thanks guys. Certainly something I'd love to look into further. I think a ledge shouldn't be too expensive, but I don't really know. We'd have to talk to the Environment Agency about flood risk permissions and stuff, but I think it's definitely worth investigating further. The next question I have is from Abby. Abby, do you want to talk, or shall I just raise your hand if you do? Otherwise, I'll just ask you a question for you. Where are you? Gone. Oh yes, you raised your hand. Perfect. I'm going to allow you to talk. Over to you.
Oh, hi, it was all very interesting, thank you. Just the question is, what do hedgehogs feed on?
I'll let somebody else go for that. Who wants to jump in?
I think Izzy or Chloe, do you want to answer that?
Chloe, feel like it? No. Hedgehogs eat insects. I think they're omnivorous, so they do eat quite a lot. They eat worms. They're sort of foragers, so they sort of snuffle around the ground. And yeah, that's what I've got to say about it.
Great, thanks. Izzy, I suppose just to add to it slightly, I suppose, yeah, they have quite a broad diet. They're not like a butterfly that can only eat one particular type of larval host plant when it's a caterpillar. So, and typically invertebrates, I think, are the main sort of source of food. But I don't know if anybody watched sort of Spring Watch, I think last year, when they had the hedgehogs eating the ground nesting bird eggs. So they can be relatively adaptable, I think, when it comes to finding food. But great. Next, I know there's people who got their hands up in the actual chat who had their hands up first. Dave Fersman, you've got a question here about. I'll allow you to talk if you want. Over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great.
Okay. Just to say, I'm very excited because the last hedgehog we'd seen in our garden was about 25 years ago. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, one appeared again. And it was interesting. He'd sort of come out, I think, with the slightly warmer weather. And I don't know if it had exhausted him, but we found him sort of curled up in the garden, still breathing, but not moving. So we've got a hedgehog house. So I moved him into the hedgehog house and he stayed there for 4 or 5 days. He seems to have disappeared now, but I leave mealworm in there, which seems to disappear every night. So I presume, hopefully, he's still around. So yeah, I'm very excited by that. I must admit, we've actually got a live hedgehog.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear, Dave. Can I ask whereabouts? Do you live in the borough of Kingston, or whereabouts are you based?
We're in just near New Malden Library, a very suburban area, about 600 yards, I suppose, from the Hogs Mill.
That's it's a New Malden Library, not Old Malden Library, New Malden Library.
Yeah, New Malden Library, yeah.
Well, that's really interesting, because what we found this year, that Old Malden Library around there is a real hotspot. So having New Malden Library as an area is really interesting.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Wow, well, thanks for that. That's really interesting news. Have you reported your sighting on the London on the Hedgehog map?
Right, I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you do that, that'd be really useful. Has anybody else on the panel got anything to say to that? Take that as a no.
I mean, just to say, Elliot, that's great, and Dave, that's great news. It's so lovely to hear, and it's also great because we often hear the story that you haven't seen them for years and years and years, decades even, and so it's great to see them coming back. Yeah, it just shows you how resilient these animals are. They are able to come back, and it's just really good news. So maybe, like Elliot's saying, it's another area that we should start looking at to see that the wider area, see if there's other hedgehogs around in the gardens in that region. So great news.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Chris, and thanks for that good bit of news there, Dave. There's still some hands up left in the chat, and I'm not sure if I've let you guys, if there's the sort of legacy hands or hands that are still waiting to be answered. So, Sharon, have you got another question, or is that your old hand?
Old hand.
Old hand, no problem. That's absolutely fine. Ruth, is that your old hand? Leave it up if you want to talk. I'll allow you to talk then, Ruth. Over to you. You're on mute at the moment, or if you would like to say something. No worries if you don't. No problem. Well, if you leave your hand up, if you want to talk, let us know. Maybe put something in the question and answer thing, and we can respond to that. And Karen, I can see you've got a hand up, so I'm going to allow you to talk now if you would like. Oh, there you go, Karen.
Hi, it's actually my daughter Penny. She's 6. She's going to ask.
Oh, thank you, Karen, and hello, Penny.
Do they have?
Oh, say that again, Penny. I didn't quite hear you. Go for it again.
How many babies do they have?
Oh, that's a great question. Who on the panel would like to take that?
I think it's around kind of up to 5 is normally, like around 4 or 5, that kind of number.
Yeah, and they're incredibly pink and tiny and very vulnerable when they're little pinky type thing when they're born. They haven't got their spines, have they? I don't think.
Yeah, their spines are like under the skin, and then once they're born, then they kind of come out.
Yeah, am I right in thinking you call a baby hedgehog an urchin, or am I just making that up?
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry. He won't even root. We need to do the singing. We need to do the singing.
Sorry, guys.
Cool. Are there any other questions? Mike, I can see you've got another question up here. Do you want to say it out loud? If you do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Elliot. Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier that you were not surprised to see, or you have noticed a lot of activity around Old Malden Library. And I wonder, when I looked at the location, and there is 2 things that probably make sense. One is, and for you to confirm, or the team is, could this be thanks to the plough pond, which is a hive of wildlife and basically a source of water, or could it be because a lot of the residents nearby in Church Road have actually turned the green verge into rewilding wildlife, many plants? So it's one of the few places where the green verges on the side of the roads are actually becoming a hive of biodiversity, and that could be an idea going forward.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose it's difficult to make really sort of significant and poignant points around it's definitely this or definitely that. It's normally a combination of factors that contribute to a species existence and recovery, but certainly having an available year-round water supply that Plough Pond the Plough Pond has, that's certainly going to be a positive. Having more in the way of cover, what we were talking about earlier with hedgerows and cover so that they can move around and navigate the landscape in a more safe way. I think another thing around the old Malden area, I don't know, it's probably the way when I'm cycling around, I do feel that, you know, even though there's quite a significant road layout there, you know, it's not as busy as other parts of the borough in terms of road traffic. So I think that potentially has an impact too. But certainly having lots of people with nice gardens who are willing to go out and make their gardens friendly for hedgehogs and have hedgehog holes in there and be part of things like this is really positive. But I don't know if anybody on the panel wants to come in about sort of general things that might contribute to a hedgehog friendly landscape.
So Elliot, I would just follow up. I guess, of course, all that, the added vegetation and you know, what's good for invertebrates is good for hedgehogs, yeah, for insect life and, you know, earthworms and other kinds of ground dwelling invertebrates. But also you mentioned earlier about kind of hedgehog highway signs or road signs. I find this an intriguing idea because it potentially does two things. I mean, it notifies people that they're in the area, and that's always a good thing, right? It just makes people aware that you've got hedgehogs, so that's brilliant thing in its own right. But secondly, even if it just slows down a small fraction of the traffic, that's got to be a useful thing. And you know, one of the things to realize with road traffic is it's probably in those quieter periods that's the most at risk to hedgehogs, right? Because they don't come out until quite late at the night, or over in the middle, you know, middle of the night sort of period. That's when they're most active. So that's actually quite interesting to think about. You know, those signs could be very useful.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm certainly going to try and get those hedgehog signs up. I've been trying to work with the highways team to do it for a while, so I'm definitely going to be pushing that forward as an action, because I think, yeah, it just makes it feel, especially in sort of strategic areas that we know we've got high populations of hedgehogs.
I was just going to add one. Sorry, I was just going to add one thing about the ponds. It might be a good idea if they're not already to have like little ramps going into the water. For hedgehogs to go in and out of the ponds, because sometimes we've had occurrences where we've heard stories of hedgehogs being stuck in ponds and drowning, unfortunately. So it's quite important that any ponds have like quite sloping edges or ramps that go into them. Yeah.
Thank you, Chloe. That's perfect. Yeah, I think, yeah, because am I right in saying they're really good swimmers, but they're not very good climbers, so they can swim around for a while, but they can't. It's difficult for them to get out of steep-sided channels and stuff. So hedgehog ramps in all ponds, please. And great. Well, I think, correct me if I'm, has anybody got any further questions? I don't think there's anything more in the chat. Is there? I don't think so. So I suppose, well, thank you so much to Izzy and Chloe for doing a fantastic presentation this evening. I think it really was very informative and very positive, I think, and sort of saying we've actually successfully helped to identify a very important hedgehog stronghold and how that might influence the conservation within the area. So yeah, I can't wait to continue working with you guys into this year of our next phase of our camera trapping. There'll be lots of opportunities for everybody to get involved. The projects that will be running in Kingston, you know, have been so dependent on local people like yourselves who are on the call this evening to contribute and get involved. So please do get in touch if you want to get involved in nature conservation actions within the borough. I like the fact that, am I right in saying from your presentation, Chloe, that out of all you had 75 volunteers with the project and 40 of those are from Kingston? Is that nice? Is that what you said? Or am I making that up?
Yeah, that's correct.
See, that's good, no? Look at that, more than half. So well done, Kingston. So that's cracking. So let's keep doing this stuff. As I say, we're pleased to say we're going to continue working on some projects this year. But yeah, thank you all so much for this evening, and do let us know if you'd like to be involved. So thank you all, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Elliot.